Ang third-party monitoring team ang inatasang mag-review ng Comprehensive Agreement ng Bangsamoro. Meron din silang sariling investigasyon kaugnay sa enkwentro sa Mamasapano. Kaugnay niya na makakasama natin sa studio ang chair ng third-party monitoring team na si Alistair McDonald. Magandang umaga. Good morning, Alistair.
Magandang umaga.
So you just came from Mindanao.
That's right. We were down in Cotabato the last couple of days.
So tell us a little bit about this third-party monitoring team. The other players in the peace process are pretty well known, but the third-party monitoring team has a relatively low profile. What exactly are you monitoring?
According to the framework agreement signed in 2012, the two parties agreed to set up a third-party monitoring team precisely to monitor the implementation of the agreements between the parties. I think the idea was that after the signature of the agreement with the MNLF in 1996, 16, 17 years later, the two parties were still arguing about whether the agreement had been implemented.
Okay.
So this time round, they decided to task an independent group to report on the implementation of the agreements. So we actually will report in confidence to the two parties every couple of months on what our findings are, but we report at least once a year to the public. And just last month, we issued our second public report.
Okay, so your job then has become a lot more complicated since January 25.
Everybody's job has become much more complicated.
Yeah. So one of the things you're trying to implement is the ceasefire, of course, and things like decommissioning and whether these things are actually happening. So was there a clear violation of the ceasefire on January 25 in Mamasapano?
I think everybody's still trying to digest the various reports which have come out. The Board of Inquiry produced its report, the Senate produced its report, the MILF produced their own report just a couple of days ago. I think people are still waiting for the report from the Department of Justice, and we have the Ombudsman, we have the Commission on Human Rights. Many bodies are looking at these. I would be very hesitant to reach any judgment at this point until we know all the facts. People will need to look at all of these reports together. I think it will be very instructive to read together the report of the PNP and the report of the MILF. There's a lot of factual material there which is worth looking at. But I think what happened in Mamasapano, whatever the origins or the course of the events were, it's become a multi-dimensional tragedy. It's tragic for the 66 people who were killed and their families. It's become tragic for I think there's something like 120,000 Bakwit now who had to displace following the campaign against BIFF. And I think in a longer-term perspective, it's tragic. It risks being tragic for the peace process. It's made that so much more complex, so much more difficult to achieve what is really needed, which is a sustained peace in the Bangsamoro, for the benefit of the Bangsamoro, for the benefit of all of the people of Mindanao, and for the benefit of the Philippines, quite frankly.
Okay.
People deserve a better future.
So you mentioned there are various other reports that have come out. The sources of these reports, the PNP, the MILF,
The Senate,
and the Senate, of course. Of course, the perception is, they're credible to a certain extent, but they all come from various biases. Now, I guess the strength of your own organization is the reason why you exist, is there's a perception that you're neutral, you're independent, as you mentioned, you're acceptable to both sides. But just to give us an idea, you don't represent countries, you're in this as individuals. You're originally an ambassador of the EU in the Philippines, but now you're retired from the EU, and you're here in your individual capacity as a diplomat. And,
as a senior citizen.
As a senior, you represent all the senior citizens in the world. But you're originally from Scotland.
Correct.
And you have a U.S. citizen who is also a longtime resident, Steve Rood, in the Philippines. Then what other countries are involved here? Or
well, we have two Filipinos.
Two Filipinos.
One from Manila, one from Maguindanao.
Okay.
And we have a Turkish colleague.
Someone from Turkey.
From a big Turkish humanitarian NGO.
Okay. And then the two Filipinos, I spotted
There's Karen Tañada from the
who's
GZO.
a long-time peace advocate, and the other person from
and
Maguindanao.
Rahib Kudto from UNIPAD, which is, again, a civil society organization.
Okay, so you were all recommended and accepted by both sides as people of, very credible with integrity and all of that. So, and then you're reporting to both sides. So it's a very sensitive role right now. There are a lot of people who are really traumatized and even angered by what has happened, and there are calls now to kind of delay or even scuttle the peace process. Obviously, you're in favor of the peace process. What needs to be done now to restore the peace process, get it back on track? Because so much information now has come out with these reports. So that was one stage. What now? And what is the role of the third-party monitoring team?
I think what is really necessary now, and I think you could say that this applies after any tragic incident like this, is a tremendous need for sobriety.
Sobriety.
Sobriety, and I think
People need to be calm.
People
Okay.
need to be calm. There have been a few voices. If you think of Cardinal Quevedo, Father Taboro from Davao.
At Father Tabora, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the president of Ateneo de Davao, yes.
Eta Rosales, for example, from CHR. And there's been other people, the business community, lots of civil society organizations who've been urging people to stand back a little, to analyze the situation and to try and find a way forward. I think also it's been encouraging that the two parties themselves are still working hard to try and find a way forward. It's not easy. An element of public trust has to be restored, but the two parties are working very hard together to try and move that process forward. And I think that as time goes by, it will still be possible to achieve the kind of sustained peace which would let future generations benefit from the end of conflict. This is something which has lasted for decades. Nobody ever imagined it would be easy to bring an end to that conflict. This tragic incident really just reinforces the difficulty, the evident difficulty of doing this. And I hope that that will encourage people to be sober, to reflect on the costs of conflict and on the benefits of peace.
Well, I'm sure you understand why people have gotten very emotional about this. But, as time goes by, I guess people will be able to analyze things with a little bit less emotion. But you mentioned Eta Rosales, the chairman of the Commission on Human Rights. One of the things that she pointed out in the Senate report was she felt that it was emotionally charged, and there are certain words that should not have been used, such as the word massacre. She did not agree with that. That was something that Senator Grace Poe, who chaired that committee that issued that report, stressed that it was a massacre, not just a misencounter. Are words important in this? And do you agree with that point of view? You mentioned that she has a sober point of view. Was she right in questioning the use of that particular word there?
That's why I use the word sobriety. The public debate, as you say, necessarily is charged with grief. But there is grief also among the families of people in Maguindanao. These are two different perspectives. I don't think it serves any purpose to heat up the debate. One has to be careful about the words that one uses in discussing this with a broad public. But what's important will be to look at the facts and to do so in a measured and sober way.
Okay, a lot of facts or information, because some of the so-called facts are being questioned. But so much information has come out. Some of them are not even disputed. Now people are calling for steps. What needs to be done? One of them is this call for the president to apologize. He's asked for understanding. He said that he's responsible, but some people, especially the families of the slain troopers, commandos, have said that's not enough. We need to hear an apology from the president. I mean, how important is an apology in this circumstance, and how would it help, or is it really necessary?
I think in the current political context, again, words are being given a very heavy weight. I think accountability is very important. Transparency is very important. But a lot of the commentators who have been addressing this issue have become more concerned with blame. And I'm not sure that that is the best way of finding a solution.
Okay, but, well, you call it blame, some people call it accountability, and then, of course, injustice, of course. No, I mean, it's part of, I guess, trying to figure out what really happened so that, these things don't happen again.
Yep.
And a lot of information has come out about who ordered what and who was in charge when, etc. But isn't that process important? Okay, let's not call it blame. Let's say pinpointing who was responsible for what, so that justice can be served. People will be punished. People will be demoted or removed from the service, and people who did right will be promoted and being given responsibility in the future.
I think accountability is essential. Justice is essential. But justice does not operate smoothly in a politically charged climate. Justice has to be, as I said, in a sober climate.
Okay, the MILF has issued its own report, and one of the notable things in that wasn't addressed so much, or was not addressed at all in the previous government reports, was the actions of the lone survivor of the 55th. Trooper SAF Christopher Lalan, whom the MILF says killed 4 napping MILF personnel, men in almost in cold blood. They were in this mosque, and then he killed a civilian who supposedly had his hands up. People are calling for justice, but people on the government side have fallen a bit, are not calling for punishing anyone in the SAF, except for the people who commanded this operation. What do you think of the MILF report and what it contained about, the accountability of the other side? They said, it was the SAF's fault. It was because they violated the ceasefire. There was no coordination between the government and this is one of the things you're supposed to be monitoring.
Yeah. I think if you just look at that specific case of Christopher Lalan, if what is in the MILF report is correct, then I think particularly with respect to that civilian, there is a strong case that an offence was committed. On the other side of it, I think you have to think of the position that Lalan was in. This guy had just left at great personal danger, a scene where many of his colleagues had been killed. I can't imagine that anybody would be operating rationally under such circumstances, and that whole concept of the fog of war would have to be taken into account as well. But when you look at that as a possibility, I think you might have to look into what the MILF were thinking the previous night. If they felt that they were being attacked, then they also could become scared, could become very nervous, would be reacting in a way which would not be the normal way of reacting.
Okay, so in other words, there are these extenuating circumstances. Lalan could have been undergoing war shock at that time and just shooting whoever he encountered because he was all alone. But on the other side, the MILF has been accused of overkill. I mean, they had already won the firefight. They found SAF commandos who were still alive, supposedly, and shot them execution style. What do you think of this allegation, and how will that affect the peace process, and how should that be dealt with?
I think, again, nobody really knows what happens. We have one report which describes the course of events in a certain way, another which describes the course of events in a different way, and it's not even been established as to who was actually involved in these final killings. Without knowledge of the facts, I'm absolutely not in a position to make any comment on that.
Okay. But I suppose if anyone would be in a credible position to synthesize these reports coming from different political biases or points of view and present maybe a more neutral or more credible report or synthesis of all of these different facts, some of them conflicting, it might be your group, the third-party monitor. Wouldn't that be part of your role to kind of synthesize and say, okay, this is what we think? You've been to Mindanao to talk to your own sources. I mean, because how do you reconcile all of these conflicts in information? And I mean, how do you move forward from here? The Senate has issued its report, the police have issued its report, the CHR, I suppose, will issue its report, but that may be disputed. There's already an argument between the senators and Eta Rosales. The MILF, of course, its report is being questioned by everyone almost everyone on the government side. Your group, as you mentioned, you're accepted by both sides. You're independent, you're neutral. Is it now up to your group to figure this out?
I think it's certainly not within our capability to reach any judgment on that at this moment. Maybe once all of the reports are in, once all of the dust is settled, perhaps we can establish a view in that. But to be honest, in that kind of incident, I'm not sure if it's ever going to be easy to really allocate responsibilities. The fog of war makes it difficult to really see deeply into a situation like that.
Okay, so just one final comment. I want to end positively here. I mean, is there a bright side to any of this? I mean, have there been some steps taken recently that you think have helped?
Yes. Just look at this ongoing pursuit of BIF.
The BIFF.
The BIFF. It's clear, and it's been reported quite widely, that the MILF have repositioned themselves to allow the army more easily to pursue the BIFF. Something like 3,000 MILF combatants have moved themselves out of their normal residential areas to get out of the way of the army. The families of these combatants are displaced. They're in evacuation centres to allow the army to do its job. I think that illustrates an ongoing partnership between the MILF and the government forces, which, although battered by what happened in Mama Sapano, can still be further strengthened.
So, and this is an example of the coordination that was supposed to be happening in the first place, from the start, between government security forces and the MILF.
That's right.
And this, of course, this is part of the comprehensive agreement that you're monitoring. So that has been going. In other words, the coordination is happening relatively smoothly in that part of the country, despite all the ill feelings created by the Mama Sapano incident.
The coordination certainly continues, despite the ill feelings of Mama Sapano. And I think over the year ahead, we will see more of that.
Okay, so at least there's something to build on.
More than something.
There in Mindanao. Thank you very much. Alistair McDonald, Chair of the third-party monitoring team, who has just returned from Mindanao.
Thank you, Howie.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Yeah.